Members, good morning. We have a quorum, and this is the appointed time. I call this meeting to order. This morning session will be adjourned at 12:45, and then the afternoon session will begin from 3:45 to 7 p.m. And if necessary, it will be extended by 15 minutes. And let me remind members that if there is direct or indirect pecuniary interest in relation to items to be dealt with today, please disclose the nature of the interest before you speak in accordance with Rule 83A of the Rules of Procedure. And please also note the voting requirements where direct pecuniary interest is involved under Rule 84 of the ROP. We continue to discuss FCR 2021 paper number 15. Members are invited to approve a new commitment of $5.42564 billion under Head 152, Government Secretariat, CEDB, CIT branch, Subhead 700 for providing funding to the Ocean Park Corporation to support the operation of the Ocean Park for a year, to repay the commercial loans, and to settle the costs for completing the Ocean Park's Pecuniary development project, and to amend the terms under Loan Fund Head 274 and Subhead 121 and 122 so that repayments will commence in September 2021. The Finance Committee spent 4 hours 6 minutes and 4 hours 37 minutes respectively in the previous three meetings to discuss papers 9 and 15, and we spent 1 hour 23 minutes to deal with the motions relating to the summoning power of the FC in accordance with paragraph 19 of the FC procedures. We have the administration team here to answer our questions. Ms. Tanya Chan. Chairman, you just quoted how much time we spent on discussing these papers, but we must also bear in mind that the government, with short notice, withdrew the previous paper and provided the new paper and the supplementary information. Anyway, I thank the government for this effort, and I thank the administration for giving a reply to the email sent by myself and Mr. Eddie Ju. I just spent a few minutes reading through it, and I have this question. Now that the administration is voicing out their request for developers to cut rent, and that for the Ocean Park there is only one single creditor, the Bank of China. In fact, last time I asked a question whether there was any discussion about a possible haircut. I understand that under the current economic situation, this is not really an uncommon scenario, because I see Mr. Edward Yao is nodding his head. You cannot guarantee a profitable business. And in fact, in this paper, it explains how other banks or multiple banks may not be cost effective, and that if we have one single bank as the creditor, it would be much more cost effective, etc. And that this, the deal has been sealed. I wonder if there is any further negotiation. I also asked about a loan. And on page 3, it is said that at the moment the administration cannot ascertain the current situation of the loan. I will invite the Deputy Chair to take the first question and my colleague to take the second one. About negotiation with banks. At the moment, the situation remains the same. We continue to abide by the loan agreement previously signed and make repayment according to the date scheduled. Chairman, if you're a landlord, you will also understand this. If they're in financial hardship, then perhaps they should cut rent or delay payment. My question is whether it is possible to go down this path. And about the other loans, Mr. Lau. Since the end of January, when the Ocean Park temporarily ceased operation, we have been having similar dialogues with banks and financial institutions. The situation, however, remains the same. What about the two government loans? In the coming 6 months, we'll focus on reviewing the way forward of the ocean park. We need the review to be completed before we charter our way forward on how these government loans should be dealt with. However, as the paper suggests, we're urging members to amend the terms under these 2 loans so that repayments will commence in September 2021. Ms. Claudia Mo, I have a number of questions. First, the prevailing global trend is that parks and zoos around the world are cancelling animal shows to uphold the humanitarian spirit. Or can the ocean park give an undertaking that from now on there will not be any more trading and exchanging of animals, and there will not be any breeding in the park? Second point, and this is my concern, because sometimes the management of the ocean park would tell the media that it's possible to change the ocean park operation ordinance. After all, the ocean park site is public property. Are you attempting to privatize it such that we have another case of the link REIT? And just like public rental housing estates now, under privatization, residents bear the brunt. And third point, about repayment of loans. Can you tell us exactly when you should make the next repayment? Is it June? And can you sort of delay it until, say, September or October? Secretary, I will invite the ocean park to answer the first and the third question, and my colleague to take the second one. Thank you, Chairman. Over the years, animals have played a very important educational role in this park. They are the ambassadors. And over the years, we have been taking good care of the animals. And because they're ambassadors, many children and students in Hong Kong have also had their awareness of conservation and nature enhanced. And I believe there is value to keep them. About loans, at the moment, the situation remains the same, like I said. There are different repayment scheduled. This will happen in the coming 6 months. And also other repayments within the next 12 months. What about the dates after June? Which month are we talking about? For principal and interest, in fact, every month repayment is necessary. Oh, every month? Ms. Claudia Mo asked about amending the ordinance and the use of the site. As we mentioned in the supplementary information, Ocean Park will be repositioned subject to review, and after we chart the way forward for Ocean Park's future, legislative amendments will be necessary to make the use of the site and its operation more cost-effective and more tailored for the needs of Hong Kong. However, we're not going to amend the ordinance to change the use of the site. The use of the site must tally with the ocean park's repositioned focus. Under what circumstances will you consider, say, the ordinance should be amended? What is the worst case scenario to trigger this? Chairman, of course, this will be based on need, and definitely it will be for the better. I don't understand what is meant by for the better. You should think in the worst case scenario that you need to amend the legislation so as to generate additional income. Please wait for another round, Ms. Claudia Mo. Mr. Wu Chiwai, 3 minutes. I have 2 questions. The Secretary said a number of times that more flexibility can be given to the ocean park to tailor for its future needs of development by amending the legislation and rezoning the site. I understand at the moment the site is zoned open space because it is a park, isn't it? We have the concept of an open space, but of course we can also designate its usage. In general, it's to be regarded as an open space. So when you take up the amendment exercise, are you going to partially or wholly rezone the site as residential, or at least for housing purpose? Or will you confine yourself to using the ocean park under its ambit as an open space or as a park, Secretary? The use of ocean park is subject to the relevant laws and the terms. Permanent Secretary can elaborate on this. Chairman, according to the land lease granted to the ocean park, it can only be used as a non-profit making oceanarium and park and such ancillary purposes. Right, so when you say you want to give greater flexibility to the ocean park, I'm asking whether this also includes residential development. As we tried to explain to members in previous meetings, the repositioning exercise will take place after the review is conducted in 6 months. We will look at the legal framework, the operation, etc. We need to take a holistic review and rethink whether we need to change the land use. In other words, if you change the land use, part of the site can be rezoned for use other than the park. Is that possible? We will conduct the review based on the 5 elements proposed in the paper. So that would also include changing the site for residential development. Chairman, I answered this question before. Like Mr. Wu Shue said, if we take a big leap and convert the site for housing, I believe this will not be appropriate. We need to consider the 3 directions and the new positioning of the ocean park. I don't think we should include this proposal, which is quite remote. Mr. Ray Chan. I did not have this opportunity, but I need to ask this fundamental question, Chairman. This funding proposal about the ocean park is different from the previous ones. Previously, we approved government loans for the ocean park to undertake projects. Now this funding proposal is about repayment of loans directly. There is no need to pay back the government, in other words. The Ocean Park Corporation Ordinance only provides that the ocean park can take out loans and that the ocean park is not the government employee. So which provision in the Ocean Park Corporation Ordinance allows Ocean Park to ask for funding from government directly? And I'm reading this. Because just now I also referred to Section 10 of the URA Ordinance, and according to the CIT branch of the CDB's reply, it is said that we cannot have direct injection to assist the ocean park's operation. So if it is not funding injection, what is it? Perhaps we should amend the legislation to make sure that the operation will not be changed by direct funding injection. And will there be any change in the future? Say Section 36 of the OPC Ordinance. Will Ocean Park subsequently become the employee of the government? Secretary. By the injection, we mean, say, the government provides direct funding and becomes shareholder of the ocean park. In fact, direct funding can be provided by the government. In fact, 2 years ago, direct funding was provided to the ocean park for education and conservation. So a lot of people are asking why another loan cannot be taken out. Is it because you don't envisage the loan to be repaid in the future? And also, if you take out another loan to repay loans, it just doesn't work and you'd rather provide direct funding. That's true. So at the moment, the law remains unchanged. I want to know whether there is any change in the agreement with the government. No. Thank you. Next, Mr. Yu Siwing. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for providing me the reply. I understand that $280 million are devoted to conservation and education every year, accounting for 20.5% of the operation expenses. Ms. Claudia Mo just now said that it could be commercialized like the link read. And that's really problematic if you want Ocean Park to remain non-profit making whilst focusing on education and conservation, etc. I understand that there will be a repositioning exercise of the Ocean Park in the coming 6 months. According to the administration, it means that there will be 2 parts to the Ocean Park's objectives. One is social benefit. It's a non-profit making park with focus on education and conservation. Does it mean that the government will shoulder the financial aspects of this focus? Next, it's about commercialization, after all, to make Ocean Park competitive in the region. So my question is, will 6 months be sufficient for you to map out the way forward for the Ocean Park according to the 2 elements you mentioned? And if it is to be commercialized, maybe the legislation should be amended. Or how long will it take to amend the law? Secretary. Indeed, the Ocean Park is facing the challenges and difficulties as explained by Mr. Yu Siwing. We have set out the 3 focus of repositioning of Ocean Park, including education, conservation, and we will change the development model. I won't comment on which element entails commercialization and which element is not making a profit, because even for education and conservation, it may, to some extent, abide by the user pay principle. And I hope that this will still be a business opportunity for the Ocean Park. It should not fall on the shoulder of taxpayers to foot the bill. As a timetable, indeed we have a very tight time frame. From the 20th of January till now, we have witnessed changes in our economic situation and social situation. We have seen a plummeting in tourism figures. Well, Mr. Yu Siwing, representing the tourism sector, must of course have full knowledge that the tourism industry in Hong Kong is facing an unprecedented challenge. So this will be our work in the coming 6 months. If legislative amendment is necessary, we'll come back to this council and kickstart the work as soon as possible. We hope to give you an answer in the coming 6 months.
Mr. Yu Siwing, if you can't complete the plan in 6 months, would you have any alternative plans? Or you will definitely complete it in half a year's time? Well, we have to set priorities in terms of the positioning based on your opinions and based on the initial plan of the positioning. We already have a blueprint, but as to specific work, including amending the legal framework, use of land, certain procedures have to be completed. There are no conflicts between the two. We won't wait for any longer to complete this. So if you have any 37 emotions, please submit them as soon as you can. Fernando Zhang, 3 minutes. We are talking about $5.4 billion for Ocean Park. Compared to the White Elephant projects, this is a minute sum. But then the Ocean Park has made sharp changes in the short spate of time. The Ocean Park has made a loss for 4 years in a row, and it has to do with the repayment of interest. It used to make some profits in the past. It enjoys a surplus, but then they still have to pay for the interest, and it's been losing money for 4 years in a row. I don't come from the financial field. I think it seems to be over borrowing. And then in January this year, you told us that you have a grand plan and you would like to borrow even more, or you are even asking us to pay from the public coffers of $10.6 billion. And then you will have 7 new themed areas. And so everything is rosy in the future. At that time, you weren't worried about borrowing. Your reply to Mr. Eddie Zhu, you said that there is this strategic repositioning plan, and the creditors are confident, so they don't see that it is a problem. But then you said that you have not foreseen the epidemic, and now you came to us and said that you must give us $5.4 billion, out of which $3 billion will be used for repayment of the commercial loans. Then we query you, and then you said that, well, we won't be needing the $10 million. So we'll look at how we would outsource our operations. We'd try to contain costs. We will work on conservation alone. And then the creditor, up to today, said that since you don't have the new positioning, we will go after you. And the creditor is the Bank of China. From a layman's point of view, the whole thing seems so odd. How do you manage your finances? So now you are left with only one creditor. And now the creditor has been very rigid. They will definitely go after you, or else you will go bust next month. Now today is already the 29th of May. So it seems that they are threatening us, and then there are so many animals, and this is part of our collective memory. You've got a staff of over 2,000 members, so you would come and seek funding from us, and then everything will be settled. And then 1 year later, you will come back to us. This is the Finance Committee. We hope that the government can manage finances prudently. And then we are also seeing the imminent legislation of the national security law. I don't know what they are up to. Mr. Alvin Yang, 4 minutes. Can the administration respond briefly to Dr. Fernando Zhang's question? Like I said last time, well, we allotted a lot of time to you, 5 minutes, 7 minutes, but then we are pressed for time this time. Dr. Zhang, please press again. Mr. Yang, please continue. Okay, please reset the clock. Thank you. I have some questions on the content of the paper. Paragraphs 13 to 15 say that the government will rethink the ocean park's future. The Tourism Commission says that the will undertake the rethink exercise within a year with the relevant bureaus. Are we talking to the bureau led by the secretary? And what about the other government departments? Which departments are you referring to? Can you give us some reply? Well, we have a plural term for the bureau, so it's apart from my bureau, there are other bureaus involved. So for land and planning, then it will be the Development Bureau. Education is the Home Affairs Bureau. And if it's conservation, then it's the Environment Bureau, and also government departments under all these bureaus. The secretary has told us what bureaus and departments involved. So we are using bureaus, the term in plural here, with an X. So I would like to understand. The secretary seems to be mentioning these bureaus casually. So will there be more bureaus added in the future with the passing of time? Because at the end of paragraph 5, it said we will seek funding application in the rest of the year. So this has to do with funding. So does it mean that in the future, if there is further financial difficulty, you don't have to seek funding from the legislature, or you seek funding from the bureaus? And then that will entail the resource distribution among the different bureaus. So I would like to ascertain which policy bureaus which will take part in this rethink exercise, and which bureaus have to shoulder the financial commitment. So the key word here is relevant. Some bureaus are relevant. So the relevancy is related to the 3 major directions, conservation and education. But an amusement park is going to be taken up by the ocean park itself. Now, as to whether the park can be developed into a leisure and resort destination, and in relation to the 2 hotels, you're talking about different bureaus as well. For education and conservation, the ocean park has all along been working on these education initiatives. Can we strengthen collaboration with education efforts within the government? So maybe we can provide experiential learning outside the classroom, and conservation can be done together with the Environment Bureau. And for developments within the community. Sorry, I have to interrupt. I understand the secretary refers to a number of different bureaus taking part in different areas. But then this ocean park has to be linked or pegged to a certain bureau. Is it the CEDB still? Now, paragraph 14, it says that rethink will examine the legal status as well as the statutory functions of the OPC, and that falls directly within the CEDB. But then if financing is concerned, will it be then the CED budget will be provided within the CEDB's budget for ocean parks use in the future? Secretary. So in terms of policies and coordination, the work will still be done by the CEDB. Dr. Priscilla Lau, 4 minutes. Chairman. This paper of FCR 2020 to 2115 tabled today, in paragraph 5, you said that in terms of the operating expenses, the staff cost is $690 million, taking up 50.4% of the expenditure. You told us that there are 2,000 staff members, so I do the sums myself. So everyone gets an average of $20,000 per month. So if we're going to give you the money, so in terms of maintaining the staff establishment, well, let's not talk about the senior management. I don't think they have a problem. But what is the specific arrangement as far as staff costs are concerned? Can I defer to the park to take that question? Mr. Lau, thank you. Thank you, Chairman. Dr. Leung, you're referring to the coming 12 months, is that right? Yes. So we will try to contain costs and increase revenue, and we don't want to dismiss staff. And then we'll use different means to contain costs. Well, when the Ocean Park service is suspended now, the senior management has already cut its pay, and there is also no pay leave arrangement. But in the coming 12 months, how can we contain costs further? This has to be deliberated further still. Chairman, I don't think your answer is specific enough. I hope that you can put your mind to it more. We are concerned about the funding and allocation, and there are some 2,000 staff members. Many of them specialists in their fields. They are precious resources, and they can't turn to other jobs easily. And it's not difficult to rehire them again in the future. So for the senior management, I'm not so worried about them. I think you can deal with that on your own. But for the middle level and also the professional staff, last time I said that I will look at your half-year plan on a half-yearly basis. So I will look at whether your half-yearly plan is viable, how to earn and how to plan and how to spend and so on. So staff costs makes up a major portion of your expenditure. So would you be able to keep a stable staff establishment in the first and the second half of the year? So who will still be kept? Which positions will still be kept? I understand where Dr. Priscilla Leung is coming from. Now, starting from the 26th of January, the park has been closed down. I believe that the park has not made major redundancies, and the aim is to retain the staff members and with a view to reopening in the future. Now, if by the end of June there is no cash flow, even if the epidemic turns for the stabilizers, they can't reopen. There are two portions of the staff. There are general staff, the ticketing staff, and so on. So when the park is closed, they don't have any work. So these staff are asked to go on leave. But then for some other services, they can't be stopped. For example, animal care. And Dr. Leung referred to staff taking care of animals. Once they are sacked, then it will be very difficult for them to find similar jobs in Hong Kong. And I think they're working on this area now. Mr. Tony Chair, 3 minutes. How can Ocean Park sustain its development? I think this is not a problem that is just presented to us today. We've been talking about it for a few years. So whether it's the senior management of the park and also the administration, their performance falls far short of public expectations. The secretary also said something about the value of the Ocean Park. So to be pragmatic, the Ocean Park should do more education and environmental protection. It works better in those areas than being serving as a theme park. Now the revenue from ticketing should not be able to cover these aspects of work, but then it's worth doing, so the public money should be plowed into it, this area. Now, the Ocean Park occupies 19 hectares, and some of the sites do have commercial value. So the revenue from that portion can cross-subsidize other work areas of the ocean park, say, for example, education and conservation. Now, since we have the MTR line reaching the ocean park, we should review that aspect in particular. And that's why I said that the management of the ocean park has been doing poorly on that front. We're talking about $5.4 billion, and some $3 billion will be used for repaying loans. So abiding by the law, of course, stands as a core value of Hong Kong. So you have to abide by your contractual terms. You have to repay for loans. But then, since we have the epidemic, we also have to keep the jobs of the staff so that they will not go out of jobs and they can plan for their future. I hope that the Secretary, you can undertake that. Please don't work behind closed doors in your work in the future. As to how we should maximize the use of Ocean Park area, we have to be mindful about its impact on Wong Chuk Hang and Aberdeen, because these two areas are undergoing transformation. I hope that you can leverage on the expertise of professionals, including our association on surveying and urban planning, and so that you can come back with a better plan after 6 months. Can you undertake that, please, Secretary? Thank you for offering your help from your profession. We're more than happy to do that. Well, it's impossible for us to work behind closed door. Like the paper that I presented, it has already incorporated views from different sectors, including Mr. Che's comments. There is indeed room for us to better use the land. And in the future, like what Mr. Che said, we can look at Wong Chuk Hang and Aberdeen and Tin Wan, and if there is room for further development for tourism purposes, then we would definitely work on it. And if needed, we will also consult the district council and the relevant associations. And Mr. Tony Che referred to support from his profession. I am more than happy to listen to them. Well, about 11 a.m., I will stop receiving 37 emotions. Dr. Junius Ho, 4 minutes. I don't need 4 minutes. Secretary, you know, I'm no big fan of yours, but I am going to support your proposal. I said that at the outset. I will not beat around the bush. Why? Because, I repeat, the Ocean Park has to be part of Hong Kong's being turned into a world city of Asia. We must do two things. Where does the money come from? You have to talk to the chief executive. When she assumed office, she made the undertaking, and she said that an extra $5 billion will be used for education purpose. Well, let's take back the $5 billion because the education system in Hong Kong is already decayed. So let's use this $5 billion to support the Ocean Park. The rides should be relocated to Disneyland, to the vacant site next to Disneyland. Some people are asking for the site next to Disneyland to be used for housing development. Well, let's move all the amusement rides to there, and then the Ocean Park will be turned into a conservation or education base. Well, let's do it like that. Let's build a theme park with good branding, a 9-star Ocean Park. You can learn from others. Macau has the second highest GDP in the world. So the Tampa it has been turned into a major hotel resort. Why can't we build a 9-star hotel here? Well, take reference from Dubai, Palm Sea Garden, or whatever. Well, at the hotel, there was some 65,000 fish. Well, by the side of the hotel guests. Well, let's do something like that. Let's work on it. And then for the other sides, well, developments can also be put in place. So these visitors can stay in this nine-star hotel. It's better that way than having them stage protests in Causeway Bay. Well, then they will not be calling for a revolution. You don't have to heed their views. They only know how to destroy and not construct. Well, I will give you this $5 billion. But please, give me a timetable as to when you will reform or overhaul the Ocean Park.
Secretary. Chair. In a previous document, we'll try to incorporate the views from Dr. Junius Ho and see whatever it works. Mr. Lam, taking 5 minutes. Chair. I listened to what Dr. Junius Ho was saying, and he's talking all those ridiculous things that he said. I was shocked. First, how do we move the amusement rides in Ocean Park to Disney Park? How do we just think about it? Disneyland already has their own amusement rides. If the amusement rides of Ocean Park are so great, then the Ocean Park wouldn't be such a difficult position now. And what about the cost? Relocation, dismantling? Does Dr. Julian Ho know public policy? He's just talking nonsense. Secretary, just don't listen to his garbage. If this is how you come over for money, that will be very difficult. In addition, Chair, Dr. Julian Ho was also saying, just move the amusement rides. The remaining land can be used for development, for room for young people, so as to deal with the living issues. That plot of land, Chair, will be used for luxurious housing. And he was rejecting the idea of public housing, and he was talking about room for development for young people. He's out of touch. And this is so ridiculous, Chair. Finally, Junius Ho also said, revolution of our times and liberating Hong Kong, and saying the young people couldn't even save their own skin. Just study history, Junius Ho. For all these years, the revolutions, there are so many people who gave their lives to the causes, like the 72 martyrs of the Huanghuagang. These people, did they all fail? Did they just all care about their own skin? You don't even have the basic knowledge of history. And saying all these ridiculous things at the LegCo, you're making a laughing stock of yourself. Next, Mr. Leung Yiu-chung, 3 minutes. Chair, I saw this letter from the Commissioner for Tourism. And the final paragraph was saying about the rethink exercise. I'm not going to read the whole paragraph. The final 2 paragraphs. There are things I want to see what your response is, Secretary. Therefore, it's hard to evaluate. It's hard to say what the arrangement will be like before we conclude the rethink exercise and whether more funding will be needed. There's another part here that says, if needed, we may need additional resources, and we will need the approval from the Finance Committee. My question for you, if we give you the money you asked for today, so you solve the pressing problem, so does it mean that there's also this pledge or this reasonable expectation that after the rethink exercise is done, however way it turns out, you will also come back for money? So it's like we are filling a pit. It's like we're giving you the promise to give you further money in the future. And it's a huge problem. Because I don't know what your future plans will be like. You may have plan A, plan B, plan C. Isn't there supposed to be some sort of cap on the money that you would, so that we get a sense of how deep this pit will be? It's like saying, we see if you go to a restaurant, you order a specific dish, but you're not even being specific about this. And then you're asking people to put the bill for you. It's like you're asking us to fill this bottomless pit. We don't know how much we're pledging to pay. So I want the Secretary to be specific. how much in the future that will be asked to pay? Secretary, you respond to the question from Mr. Leung Yicheng. We're asking the LegCo for funding. It's as stated in the paper. And in responding to members' questions during the previous meetings, there was this point raised about what we would do in the future. So we set out this outline in the paper. We have incorporated the views from members. Now we have set out in more details the future directions, the way forward. But there were 5 things that we will have to make adjustments. Chair, I know what you're trying to say. Could you ask the Secretary to address this point? Just give us an estimate of the per cap. We have listened to all the talk about directions, but there has to be an upper limit on the money that you will be committing to. Chair, Secretary, is there a cap on the money that you? Chair, we have set out the amount of money we need, and as for the future, if we have to come back to the LegCo for more funding, then we will make a fresh request. Things may change in the future. So the way it works is that we hope there will be healthy development for the Ocean Park after the rethink exercise. Mr. Holden Chow, 4 minutes. Thank you, Chair. Follow-up question. Previously, the Bureau gave me this letter saying this. There will be changes to the mode of operation. So there are plans for the Ocean Park to secure external sources of resources. So follow-up question on this point. The Ocean Park Corporation Ordinance place restriction on what the Ocean Park can do. The sources of revenue can either be some money from the government or to a very limited extent from ticket sales. We talked about this in the past, possible amendments to the Ocean Park Corporation legislation so that the Ocean Park may be able to seek outside investment or other sources, other modes of revenue, so that the Ocean Park will be less reliant on government funding. And that might be more acceptable to the public. So my question is, was referred in your letter to, there was reference in your letter to these future possible arrangements. So for these possible changes to the Ocean Park Corporation Ordinance, do you already have a preliminary timetable, preliminary thoughts about something may have to be done in the next 1 or 2 months? For the current legislative session, we only have a month or 2 months left. You can't get much done. But can you give us details on an estimated timetable for the future so that we can get a better idea? I also want to take this opportunity to say this. The Ocean Park also has 2 hotels in the area, so there may be restrictions placed by the Ocean Park Corporation Ordinance. These 2 hotels may have been excellent sources of revenue, but they haven't been able to share the revenue with the park. It must be waste, because maybe the hotels have been able to make the profit thanks to the Ocean Park, but the Ocean Park has been unable to tap into the profits of these 2 hotels. So if there are changes to the Ocean Park Corporation Ordinance, there needs to be some sort of relaxations on the restrictions so that other external sources of revenue can also flow to the Ocean Park, so that the Ocean Park will not have to rely on government funding. So I want the Secretary to give more information on what things will be like with the possible amendment to legislation. Chair, about the finances of the Ocean Park. The main sources of revenue for the Ocean Park has been ticket sales from the inception of the Ocean Park. As you can see over here, most of the income has come from ticket sales. But then at one point, this revenue took a plunge from 2015. We were able to maintain roughly 5 million people in attendance, but then things took another plunge earlier this year. So for most of the time, it has been all about ticket sales. And if there were investment initiatives and it had to take out loans, but it has been rare for the park to come to the government for funding. As we said, we'll try to cut costs and explore new sources of revenue. Cost cutting is vital. And as for expanding new sources of revenue, say something about the hotels or flexible use of the land nearby, ways to lessen the reliance of the park on ticket sales alone. These are things we'll look into. And in the next 6 months, we have to look into that. And as for legislative amendment, we also have to bear in mind the legislative session this year. There's not much time left, but if it's needed, we will get started as soon as possible. Next, Mr. Eddie Chu, 3 minutes. Thank you, Chair. For the $5.4 billion package for the ocean park, the math just don't look reasonable. At the previous meeting, we focused on $5.4 billion, and out of that sum, $3.1 billion is used for repaying loans. In the breakdown set out in paragraph 26 of the paper, I see it's more serious problem. Out of the $5.4 billion package, 80% of it it's for loan repayment. Second, the money will go into the Taishuan development project to cover the cost overrun. And that problem isn't worse than we thought. In the latest document, in the latest paper, the cost overrun is increased from $2.29 billion all the way to $3.86 billion. That's more than 15% in cost overrun, and we haven't even got to the end of it. On the 14th of May 2013, when the Finance Committee of the Electrical agreed to lend $2.29 billion for the Taishuan development project, the Commissioner for Tourism back then, in answering a question raised by Mr. Felix Chung, was saying that even if the cost turned out to be higher than the amount estimated, the government will not provide further financial assistance to the ocean park. What do we have now? In paragraph 26 of the paper, item B, I want to thank Tanya Chen for bringing this part up. Item B in paragraph 26, capital expenditure, $690 million or so. That amount of money is partially used to cover the cost of a run of the Taishuan project. And item C in paragraph 26, for costs for settling current liabilities and possible compensation, that's $500 million. The $500 million is set aside for possible compensation for claims from the companies working on the Taishuan development project. Item D in paragraph 26, repayment for commercial loans. We see the $650 million because there are other commercial loans associated with the Taishuan project. So we take into account all these three items: 695, 500 million, $650 million. That's $1.84 billion. That's for the Taishuan development project. You promised us back in 2013 you would not ask for further funding, but now you're asking for the more than $1.8 billion. Why is this the case, Chair? Based on that alone, it makes no sense for us to give you the money. Chair, we are on a time crunch. I just want an explanation for these figures. The cost overrun is at least $1.57 billion. But in 2016, you borrowed the money and $600 million plus this capital expenditure set out in the paper here. Eddie Chu, please stop. Eddie Chu. To be fair, your time is up. You have to make time for the secretary to answer a question. Just press the button again. I know it's a complicated question. Just be precise. Next, Mr. Andrew Wen. Chair, Could you let the secretary give a response? It's about the money. If you want to give him the time, then give him use your time. Well, so you're not asking for money, you're also asking for time. Chairman, let the secretary give a response. Just give it yes or no. So, how about you lend me your time as a chairman? Just get straight to it. Reset the clock. So, can we reset the clock, Chairman? Okay, reset the clock for Andrew Wan, please. Secretary, just then Junius Hall was saying something. I still have respect for you because he was talking nonsense and you didn't nod. That's why I have respect for you. For all this use of land resources, all he gave us was nonsense. You didn't quite respond to that. I just heard the permanent secretary was saying something in response to a question raised by Mr. Wu Chi-wai. A point that wasn't touched on. It's about a potential financial commitment. It's about the land lease and paying the land premium. It's about something back in the 1970s. Based on the land lease, I think in English it says something like it's about the land is meant to be non-profit making oceanarium and for other ancillary purposes. But based on the latest paper from a document, there's the possibility that the purpose of the land use will change. So when the government gives land to an organization and there is a change in the land use with financial business implications, then you may have to ask the organization to pay the land premium. So if after a rethink of the ocean park and there may be a change in the business purpose, and as I heard from the secretary, there may be a focus on the tourism. My question is, if there's a change in the land use, will the ocean park be asked to pay the land premium? We don't know what you'll be doing with the plot of land. Then that's a huge thing. There's no estimate for any potential payment for the land premium, because you may have to keep coming back to the finance committee for new funding. Then you're giving yourself trouble. Is there a possibility that Ocean Park will be asked to pay the land premium, secretary or the permanent secretary? Chairman, for the land use of the Ocean Park, so the government granted the land to the ocean park. The land can only be used for non-profit making, oceanarium, and other ancillary purposes. If the ocean park goes ahead with this mode of operation as a recreational educational park, so there's no land premium involved. Chair, she was repeating my point. As I said, they were saying there is a possibility that the park will be used for tourism purposes to balance the books. So you're saying that there is a possibility that it will be used for those purposes. Chair, can I resume with my response? The ocean park has 2 hotels. So there is this subordinated lease involved for these 2 hotels. The land premium was paid by these 2 hotels to the government. It goes right to the treasury and does not go through the ocean park. Dr. Priscilla Leung. Follow-up question about the staff of Ocean Park. In the first half of 2020, I was talking about this professionally trained staff. Does it mean we can keep all these professionally trained staff to look after the animals? Or are these staff members on short-term contract for this pool of talent? I also looked at the feasibility study report you gave us. I really want to focus on conservation and the people looking after and training these animals. I want to know what will happen to these people in the next 6 months. Chair will let the Ocean Park take this question. Thank you, Chair, and Priscilla for a question. I haven't been able to talk about this. Now, we plan to take part in the pro-employment measures rolled out by the government, the ESS employment support scheme. Let me start with conservation. The professionally trained staff. Most of the staff looking after the animals or on education, these are full-time staff. So in the future, we want to focus on education, conservation. We want to keep our edge in conservation and education. So we try to retain and train the staff. We try to cater to the needs of the staff.
Chairman, this is just a suggestion. We have so many animal lovers in Hong Kong, and I teach in City University, and now they've set up a college for veterinary science. The park has been closed. The staff members are left idle, but you need to keep this pool of staff. I hope that you will continue to make an effort to give full play to their potential. For example, you can have training courses. Apart from generating income, you can allow them to do more to maximize the use of the manpower resources. They may even go to secondary schools to give talks, to give seminars. These are all very useful ideas. You need to think very hard. For example, you can have online courses. Just like myself, I also hold an online lecture for several dozen students. So this is my suggestion on retaining staff. I hope we're able to keep Ocean Park. If circumstances permit, we'd like to reopen the Ocean Park as soon as possible. For staff specialized in animal care, we also hope that they will be able to serve the public soon. All right, I think that's all for me, Chairman. We'll spend 11 hours on this item. So may I appeal to members of this complex to come down as soon as possible, because I'll draw a line soon and take back the floor. Mr. Rebecca Chan. About the $5.4 billion funding, let's say if within a month Ocean Park is to collapse, then can you guarantee that there will not be any staff made redundancy? Second, I am concerned about animals. Apart from the animals you're keeping in the park, if any wild animal is found in Hong Kong, is it that Ocean Park will shoulder all costs to keep it? Say if it is an endangered species, does the Ocean Park take care of the endangered animal? And third point, about generating income, I understand that there is a difficulty, and the government should review the Ocean Park Corporation Ordinance. According to record, Ocean Park is a homebrew park, and it's a world acclaimed park. In 2012, it actually won an award at the best theme park, and I know that several countries like Vietnam, Thailand also wanted to build a similar park in their country. So if there is collaboration, Ocean Park will be able to generate some income. But under the existing Ocean Park Corporation Ordinance, isn't it that there is a straitjacket stopping Ocean Park from receiving help from other investors? So the ordinance should be amended, because otherwise Ocean Park's income will not surge simply by boosting local tourism. So can we remove obstacles in this ordinance? Point number 4. There are different business models, online, offline, available now. But for the merchant store in Ocean Park, it's still inside the park only. For other theme parks, I know that some outlets are available in different shopping malls already. I wonder if this mode of operation limits the source of income. A number of questions, no staff to be made redundant, and also endangered species and merchandise being made available in other stores. I will defer these questions to the Ocean Park. And about expanding Ocean Park's business to generate income, Ms. Chan's understanding is correct. The park hasn't been able to maximize its resources in this regard. I recall, well, I came across different pieces of legislation. Say for the VTC, in its early days, it is confined by law to provide services to locally only. But then when we review the situation, the law ordinance may be amended so that more work can be taken up by Ocean Park to generate income. In fact, however, there have been numerous collaboration projects between Ocean Park and other counterparts around the world, albeit non-profit making. I'll defer to the OP to answer other questions. In the coming 12 months, apart from tapping new sources of income and cutting expenses, like I said before, supporting employment and keeping jobs are important. As I mentioned just now, we have taken part in the ESS, Employment Support Scheme, and as employers, we will shoulder our responsibility as agreed in the scheme. As for other rescued animals, money comes from our own pocket, and if we keep them in the park, then the cost of keeping these animals are fully provided by Ocean Park. Right, I have a follow-up question. Say in the future, if we could remove obstacles in the ordinance to increase the income of Ocean Park, that's one question. The other question, in the case of the OP seizing operation, is it that the endangered animals will not be looked after? For the first part, Ms. Chan's understanding is again correct. This is something that we can think along. As for a substantial increase in income, that really depends. For the other point, OP can take the question. About rescuing marine animals, dolphins, for example, the AFCD works with OP, and if OP loses its function, the AFCD may not have the manpower and the resources or the knowledge or expertise and experience in the area. Dr. Helena Wong. Just now, I was listening in upstairs and I heard the really staggering remarks made by Dr. Junius Ho. He said that the government should retract funding for the Education Bureau, several $billion for use by Ocean Park. He said education in Hong Kong is a mess, but he's a legislator here, and by criticizing so harshly the education sector in Hong Kong, he is undermining the effort of all educators in Hong Kong. In fact, it's the administration which, in the first place, proposed a liberal studies subject and also senior secondary structure, with the purpose of cultivating independent thinking skills among students. But then the whole system is rotting with draconian laws one after another. Now the national security law can be directly promulgated by the central authorities, and that we know nothing about the law yet. And now the pro-establishment camp members could just clap along with the central authorities, singing praises to the sky. It's really ridiculous how the loyalists are behaving themselves for him to criticize the education sector. This is about a $5.4 billion funding application. Over $3 billion will be for the Ocean Park to repay the commercial loans and other financing costs. Ocean Park as a corporation should be running on a self-financing basis. Why is it that on the brink of default of a loan, Ocean Park can now just ask for a big handout from the government? I don't think it's justified. You say you have a cash flow problem, then why don't you take out another loan? You can take out a loan from the government or from other banks. Why should it come out from the pockets of taxpayers? Why should we help you foot the bill? What about cash flow problems with other banks? Should taxpayers be footing the bill again? So, who is the creditor, after all? Apart from the Bank of China, is there another creditor? Secretary. Mr. Lau can answer her question. Thank you, Chairman. We disclosed the main creditor in the paper. That's the Bank of China. But we have other creditors, staff, suppliers, contractors. So in other words, BOC is the main creditor. So if there is a default, what will happen? Is it that Ocean Park will be folded? Will BOC files a liquidation petition? Is there any collateral? Can the government intervene? Can the government mediate and ask for BOC to postpone repayment? You've answered this question many times. In terms of liabilities, government is the biggest creditor with $5 billion on loan with interest. So in this paper, we're applying for deferral of repayment. And after consolidation of loans, there is only one creditor, that is the bank. But let me answer Dr. Wong's question. As we answered a number of times before, the Ocean Park is now in financial dire straits. And our mission is to reduce this burden. Any creditor can cause Ocean Park to be liquidated meanwhile, not just the biggest creditor. Mr. Jeremy Tam. Last time you disclosed that 3 loans are related to Ocean Park, 2.6, $500 million, etc. I want to know the annualized interest rate. Chairman, this is something we cannot disclose. Why not? The interest rate and other terms agreed between the debtor and the creditor in a commercial setting cannot generally be disclosed. Deputy Chair, listen to me. Because by disclosing the interest rate, well, can you just stop? But in 2005, when you applied for a loan, at the time you did disclose the interest rate. Please allow me to continue, Chairman. If it is disclosed, it will affect Ocean Park's future ability to raise loans with other banks. It will also affect the relationship between BOC and their clients in the future. Please pause here. In FCR 2005-06-35, Annex 2, back then, in 2005, when you asked for a loan, you stipulated the interest rate, and at the time it was set at a fixed interest rate of 5% per annum for the $5.5 billion loan. And also $1.38 billion government loan. It comes with the terms set out here. So it's not the case that the interest rate had never been disclosed. Especially when we're asked to foot the bill, it's impossible that we would support you if you don't disclose the bill. We don't know what the interest rate is, whether it's reasonable. Especially for the $1 billion revolving loan. There is no collateral. And we know that definitely the interest rate for a revolving loan is higher. We need to know exactly how much it is, because the government is asked to foot the bill. Usually, we know that if there is a pledge, definitely the interest rate will be higher. If in the end the government foots the bill, then BOC is providing a loan at a very high interest rate, whereas there is guarantee from the government in the end. Then in other words, BOC will be making a big profit. That is why we request that the interest rate be disclosed. I'll ask Permanent Secretary to clarify some facts, and then the OP didn't take the question. The member referred to the LC paper about the interest rate disclosed. It only related to the government loans. For the commercial loan, FC's approval was needed, and all along the Ocean Park never disclosed in any way the interest rate for the commercial loan. Mr. Jeremy Tam. No, I'm not asking for elucidation. I asked you to answer my question, Deputy Chair. For any major loan for a major development project, there is this consideration. Under reasonably foreseeable circumstances, we should be able to repay the loan. Next, Mr. Shukachan, 3 minutes. I think the administration and chairman would agree that $5.4 billion won't solve the problem once and for all. Is it a relief? Well, we need to ask whether it is possible. Mr. Alan Zeman, in an interview, said that $5.4 billion would only allow some breathing space with the management for the time being. And if an experienced management team cannot be formed, then he'd rather Ocean Park cease operation. After logical election, in another term, I envisage that Ocean Park will be coming back for more funding from the government. In the past few days, a lot of specific questions have been asked, and we haven't heard answers, not even about the interest rate. So what are you doing apart from asking for a big handout? If the $5.4 billion funding is approved, I hope that this will only be good for parting with OP. Say, if this is for Ocean Park's parting, will it be sufficient, and how would it be allocated for, say, laying off staff, sending off animals, selling assets, etc.? Can you make sure that after the breakup, staff members will be adequately compensated? And how do you make sure that the management will not scurry off with a big sum of money? Because we want to make sure that the management won't be scooping a significant portion away. And Chairman, I heard that the neighboring places like the Philippines, Vietnam, Thailand, etc., really have high, really appreciate Ocean Park. I want to know more about these places, because otherwise, animals could be hurriedly sent off to the mainland or the zoos in the mainland. I'm not saying that they are substandard, but indeed there are some substandard parks and zoos in the mainland. So I want to make sure that these animals will not be sold off cheaply to these substandard zoos on the mainland. Secretary. Well, I don't think Mr. Shukachan's understanding is consistent with our suggestion in the paper. We're not suggesting laying off staff and sending off animals. And the money will not be used for what he said. There is a specific use, as proposed in the paper, that is for repayment of loans and to cope with its future operation. So Mr. Shue in his question asked whether the $5.4 billion will be spent on the scenarios. He mentioned the answer is no.
Dr. Low, I quote 5 minutes. Thank you, Chairman. The Ocean Park plays a very important social function. And they are now facing a cash flow problem. And it's been discussed hotly in the community, but we don't want to view it as a pure business operation. If we do that, say for example, now if that is the case, a lot of swimming pools will have to be closed down because you are charging a very cheap entrance fee for the people of Hong Kong, and the entrance fee will not be able to cover the operating cost. And the same goes for the Victoria Park. How can they balance the books? Well, we would not be viewing this from that perspective. All these facilities are playing a social function. It is a kind of social investment. Many of my friends take a broader perspective on the future of Ocean Park. We should attach due importance to its function in education and conservation. This is a very good tourism sport, cultivated over the years. And there are that many premium tourist attractions in Hong Kong, but Ocean Park is a flagship tourism product. And if we get rid of it, it will have great ramifications to the tourism industry. We can't afford to lose such a flagship product. But how can we convince the public that if we are going to inject $5.4 billion, then the Ocean Park will have a healthy development or will be able to fend for itself? We talked about some social functions of the Ocean Park, but then we also need new thinking on the operation model. And some friends have made suggestions which may not be viable but are still worth consideration. The Ocean Park is very accessible now, especially by the MTR network. We've got a very scenic side with hills and oceans around it. In terms of retail and leisure functions, can more be done? Say, even outside the Ocean Park, at the entrance of the can the entrance of the Ocean Park be set back a bit so that quality and shopping facilities can be built for enjoyment by the public and the tourists? Can we also be rezoning some of the land for housing development? What about starter homes and not luxurious flats? Can we build smaller units for purchase by the young couples? Their children will be very happy because they live next to the Ocean Park. So all these ideas can be considered. But I'm a bit disappointed that you can only provide relief for the pressing needs, and after that you will come up with new thinking. If you can come up with a clearer plan, then that will be supported by members of the public. So can I have some response to the proposals just now? Thank you, Dr. Low, for your comments and proposals. This funding application is to help provide or address their pressing needs. We submitted a paper on the 20th of January setting out the strategic repositioning plan. There has been a big deterioration of the financial situation. But in that earlier paper, we laid out 7 major directions, and that includes the proposal by Dr. Low, that is, we make flexible use of the entrance area of the ocean park. And also in the operation model, can we outsource some operations as well? So all these have been included in the original plan. And in the supplementary paper, we also mentioned about new directions, and we hope that Dr. Low's views can also be incorporated. Dr. Pierre Chan, 4 minutes. Dr. Pierre Chan, 4 minutes. Is it my turn? Please have switch on the mic for Dr. Chan. Good morning. I would like to follow up on the funding. In your supplementary paper, you said that the ocean park should focus more on education and conservation and leverage on its experience in those 2 areas. My question is, well, I'm still worried about what will happen next year and thereafter. Would you be coming back to the FC to seek for funding for your recurrent expenditure? Well, it is actually the responsibility usually of the government and the NGOs to do education and conservation work. How can you ask a self-financed corporation to commit recurrent expenditure on education and conservation? I mean, is this done anywhere else in the world? In the past 40 years, since 1977, well, this theme is the core theme of Ocean Park. Now it's now facing certain difficulties, but all along it's been operating on a self-financing model. So I don't want to give the members the wrong impression that all the operations be handed over to somebody else. No, we floated 3 major directions. We hope that the income from ticketing and other areas can help. And over the past 4 decades, through their own investment and through borrowing, they've been operating on this theme too. But merely relying on this theme cannot be sustainable. So other themes have been incorporated as well. And in the next few years, we're mindful that the economy and the attendance will not be as good as before. So we have to contain costs, and we have to increase revenue, and we are diversifying the functions. Well, let me follow up. I've been working as a volunteer for some non-profit making organizations. Of course, they do have items in which losses are incurred. We usually try to balance the books by having the profitable areas, cross-subsidizing the loss-making areas. Now you say you would focus on education and conservation work. What is the annual expected expenditure? So how much will it cost for them to work on these initiatives? Who will take the question? In the paper that we tabled today, well, a member has asked about the recurrent expenditure. In the past 5 years, we spent $280 million on conservation education, taking up 20.5% of the annual expenditure, and that is compared to $120 million in amusement rides, taking up 8.5%. Now, conservation and education, a lot of capital investment is entailed. Now, right now, conservation and education still remain one of the most important tasks of Ocean Park. But members have, or others have suggested whether more can be done. If more investment is plowed into it, can we get enough from income from ticketing to sustain its operation. And Dr. Pierre Chan referred to cross-subsidization. This is something that we will explore further. Mr. Michael Tian, 5 minutes. Thank you, Chairman. Secretary, good morning. I just came back from the MPC session, so I might not be following up the issues closely. So please do not mind if I ask a question which has been asked before. Well, you know about our stance to Ocean Park. I have made my stance publicly. The biggest problem is the positioning and the role of the Ocean Park. Whether you're a political party, a company, if your positioning is unclear, you don't have a future. Well, Ocean Park is facing the same situation. It's neither fish nor fowl. It is a commercial operation, and yet it has to work on education and conservation. Nowhere else in the world can that kind of model be successful. In the long term, you can go along only two paths. Like Disneyland, you can go purely commercial, and you can adopt two approaches. You can do it with local expertise, or you can ask for collaboration with an overseas theme park. And the other direction is purely education and conservation. Then it becomes a public service organization. And then you may come and seek funding, say, every year for $100 million to work on that. So you would work within your budget. So you just bring in the right number of people under that budget. And then we can approve the funding annually, and people are made happy, and the operation can go on. But whichever path we take, I'm sure you won't be able to answer my next question. I don't know which path is better. Nobody in Hong Kong knows. And to me, we have to pull in the support of banks. As long as the bank can support, then whatever option you have, they will be closely monitoring you, and they can lend you a big hand. They will monitor the senior management to make sure that they can repay in good time, and that they will call loan if you are in a dire situation. So there will be somebody monitoring them to make sure that they spend prudently. And if that doesn't work, then you can come and seek funding from the electrical. That is the right path to take. So no matter what operation model will the Ocean Park take up, I hope that there will be continuous participation and involvement of the bank. If the bank is confident about you, I will be confident about you. If the administration is confident but the bank is not confident, then I don't have any confidence in you. I'm sorry about that. So on the table, well, you seem that you'll be letting the bank go, and you didn't tell us that whether the bank will support you again in the future. To me, the thing is very straightforward. You try your very best to tell the bank that we will seek funding from the electrical, so give us another half year or 1 year, extend the repayment period. We can still give you the interest due. And once we've got the new proposal, then please continue to support us, talk with them over the new plan or proposal. So as long as the bank supports you, then I will support your whatever proposal you have. That is my stance. But now your proposal seems to be saying that you will let the bank off or let them go. This is most problematic. I find it hard to support the proposal. So my question is, what security does the bank have? Now, if we tell the bank that, well, we can only get sufficient funding for another years of operation, can you come up with a new model? So if the bank calls loan, what can they have actually? The 7,000 animals are not worth much. The amusement rides are not worthy. So what good does it do to them if they call loan now? Secretary. I agree with Mr. Tan's point about positioning and role, but in reality, we can't really do it in a dichotomy approach. Is just a either purely commercial or either conservation education. Anyway, the Ocean Park is a statutory body. It's biased towards public service, but then over the past 4 decades, they have been operating on a self-financing basis. That's all right, that's all right. No matter what hybrid it is, as long as the bank supports you, then I will support you. But the question is, the bank would like to leave. Then I find it problematic. So if the banks tells us that they are definitely going to call loan, what can they get in return? Can we not talk to them, ask them for an extra year or so that we have more breathing space? Well, we said that very clearly in the last two sessions. It's not about the bank calling loan. It's just that the cash flow is being depleted at the Ocean Park. And if the cash flow problem is not addressed, so all creditors can call for a winding up petition. Dr. Kwokake, 4 minutes. I think this is very much a scam here. Pecuniary development, the government decided back then that it will not inject capital, and then the Ocean Park is allowed to borrow. In 2013, you told us that it's $290 million. In 2015, and an additional 650 million was needed. And early this year, it's $3.86 billion, over budget by 68%, and we're not seeing the end yet. So whether it's the board of directors or the senior management, well, they should have been fired just because of this. Second thing, you took out a loan from the bank. So you should shoulder your responsibility for the loan. Now, we've got this very decadent son of a father who is rich, and the decadent son, we said that the father would not repay for me. So it's my own responsibility to repay the loan. So the bank allowed you to take out a loan, and we saw him and said, you've taken out a loan, you must repay it. So you are forcing Hong Kong people to repay. Shouldn't the bank also take some responsibility? In Lehman Brothers incident, we are seeing a similar situation. The bank has made a decision. Why do we have to mail it out? And for capital expenditure, it's around $698 million, including the Pecuniary development project. How much of it is related to Pecuniary? I think your books are very confusing, are in a mess. If an auditor comes to audit you, you will be blamed. You are producing false accounts here. How can it be? Well, the secretary, you must resign if the administration is to take responsibility. If the group behind you is to be blamed, please give us a full account as to why this is the case. And you said that you would work on it in 2017. You made that commitment in 2013. Now it's already 2020. Now, can you give me some of the over budget, of the overspending? And why are we not doing it like the way we dealt with it in the Lehman Brothers incident? Why do we have to compensate the bank or bail out the bank for the mistake it made? Let me clarify. I think I've give me the figure of the overspending of the Pecuniary. How much of it is within the $698 million is related to Pecuniary? For the $698 million, how much of it is related to Pecuniary? It covers the remaining cost construction for Pecuniary. How much? How much? Can I be allowed to finish? Chairman, let me reiterate a few points here. I don't want to mislead you. First of all, we're not talking about a single loan here. The park has said that it will continue to talk with the creditors, especially the bank, and in the course of negotiation, if there is any cost that can be saved, then that will be done. Now, the funding applied has a designated use, and any excesses will not be deposited into the bank's account. And the Pecuniary development is included in the $698 million. The park said that it can't give you the breakdown because they still have to further negotiate with the contractor. If we give you the sums here, that will affect the park's ability to negotiate with the contractor on the remaining amount. So the park has a responsibility to minimize the cost as much as possible. That's my answer to Dr. Kwok.
Why do we have to foot this bill? 5 minutes. Speaker's not using microphone. Chair. Quick question for the secretary. Are you going to ask Alan Zeman to help rescue the ocean park? Chair. Right now, the ocean park has its own board. Dr. Alan Zeman has all along been paid. They really cares about the park. Had been with the park for a long time, and on multiple occasions, Dr. Zeman said he would be glad to help. And around these times, Dr. Zeman also had exchanges with me. So, Chair, as my colleague just reminded me, Dr. Zeman is still an advisor for this Pecuniary project. Chair, I'll raise these questions. Here's the reason. When Alan Zeman was driven out by a CY Leung back then, there was a time, and there was a huge, a few years back then, there was a huge loss sustained by the ocean park. There was, in 2018, there was a huge increase in the losses. For all these losses, what happened? Was it something wrong? Was it something about the management? We don't know much about the business operation side of it. But for the government, in this request for the bailout package, I don't see any direction for this ocean park. You're asking for $5.4 billion of public funds. We can't just come to save you with money every single time down the road. Secretary, you're just telling me this. You haven't addressed my point. You're saying Dr. Zeman's being acting as advisor. Have you asked Dr. Alan Zeman for help if you're so committed to the cause of saving the ocean park? Chair, a lot of people do care about the ocean park. They want to see how they can help tide the park over this difficult period. So I want to show you this chart again. In 2003, up to 2015, let's not get hung up over who was the chairman for a moment. In terms of the attendance and profit, 2003 to 2015, that was a high point, but the plunge took place in 2015. Some people thought it was about the Occupy Central movement. That was a sharp drop in tourists, and then another plunge last year. But the attendance was around 5 million people per year. But the second plunge was this year. Secretary, you can change this impression. This all the loss started to happen after the change in the board management of the ocean park. You don't have to go to all the lengths about all the social movements and things and all the pandemic. You have closed the ocean park for a few months. As I said, Chairman, I care about the animals more so than the park. Since you're not even sure if you can get a $5.4 billion bailout package, can you give us a bit details on it? We know the amusement parks aren't worth a lot of money. Here's the thing, I care about the animals. How are you going to look after the animals? If the package is voted down today, what are you going to do with the animals? You have to let us know what you would do with the animals. Look after the animals currently in Ocean Park. How much will that cost? Can you give us a number on that? Chair, we cover that. It's also in the paper. Chair, can you just say that again? In the paper we gave you today, there is reference to this figure. So in terms of the recurrent expenditure, say stuff on the staff costs, the Ocean Park on every year, on average, the park spends $280 million on conservation and education. That's 20.5% of the annual operation expenditure. Covers animal costs, shows, and fairs. But that figure does not cover the capital expenditure and depreciation costs for those places where the animals are living in. Now, say the package doesn't go through today. Have you ever given any thought to a package about looking after the animals? Chair, our focus is to keep the Ocean Park in business. I understand that Mr. Roy Kwong cares about the animals, but it's about the survival of the Ocean Park. I think Mr. Roy Kwong knows well what will happen if the park goes under. Thank you, Chair. Dr. Chen Chongchai. For the Ocean Park, the prospect of liquidation is real. So if that happens, then there will be a loss of a major point of appeal in the Southern District. Has the Bureau thought about this? If the Ocean Park is liquidated, what will be the impact on the planning in terms of tourism for the Southern District? In terms of the transport planning, say the South Island line of the MTR, there's a station specifically dedicated to the Ocean Park. If the Ocean Park goes under, then what will happen to the station? Is it going to be closed? For the Southern District, a couple months ago, we saw the floating restaurant of Jumbo Floating Restaurant had to suspend operation because of the epidemic. So in the days to come, if the Ocean Park is goes into liquidation, so isn't that a complete failure for the government's planning in the Southern District? So this is so much about government planning. Is there going to be any follow-up work to be done for the Southern District? Thank you, Chair. The Ocean Park has been having a knock-on effect on the economy, not just for the Southern District. There are tourists coming in. As you can see in the supplementary document, we're hoping that with the Ocean Park, there will be knock-on effect on the development in the neighboring district. In the areas near the Ocean Park, places of natural scenery that can tie in with the theme of the Ocean Park, because we have this shoreline, and we also have these coastal areas. For conservation, these are huge. And it's on the eastern side. There are also cultural sites. The Aberdeen, the Fisherman's Village, Typhoon Shelter, all the way to Poffolam. These are places of interest. And it's for tourism. A key point of our plan for tourism is about the local economy. For the Southern District, we thought about whether we could turn that into a point with local economy as an appeal. We tried that in Shamshui Po and other areas. But for the Southern District, we're hoping that to have something of the transport system and support facilities in place. So we want to bring everything together. Mr. Porter, 3 minutes. I think I agree with the point that we have to take the responsibility for something, but I'm worried about this bottomless pit. Even after we're paying all the $3+ billion for the commercial loans, and the revolving facilities has almost dried up. About the $5.4 something billion. You can say you can defer the repayment, but then at some point you have to start repaying. As the Deputy Chairman just said about the ESS scheme, it's just loan after loan. Here's my question. I want to save the park, but I want to make sure the rescue package actually works. Take the example of, like, on a smartphone, you can pause and have a look. We have this airplane mode. When, say, for restaurants, you have the social movements and you have the pandemic, restaurants will see diminishment in the revenue. So restaurants just go into something of like a hibernation. If we, coming back to the ocean park, if we have to think about the rescue package, can't we just think about a bit of a hibernation mode for the ocean park and stop insisting on reopening the park just to cut losses? That's how you can show us you're serious about saving the park. The government is giving so much money to the ocean park, $5.4+ billion. This is interest-free loan. The government has been giving the park so much money. As you stated in the paper, if you do give it a subsidy, if the bank goes into hibernation mode, then at least you can cut the cost, so that you can at least cut the cost, say, for the next 6 months, and then we come up with a new proposal. What do you think, Mr. Chair? Well, the hibernation mode has already kicked in from January up to now, but the park has to stay in business. As another member said, he cares about the animals, and there has to be the maintenance going on. That's 20% of the operational costs for the conservation and stuff. I think one point of concern raised by Mr. Tse is about the park as an ongoing business. So there we have this liquidity problem. That's why in the January paper we submitted to the electrical, we were thinking that the cash flow could last all the way to the end of January to December. But then the parks suspend operation. So how about so let's stop talking about the $3 billion. Can we just make a change to the plan to keep the park all the way up to the end of this year? So, because what we have now is that any creditor can apply for liquidation of the park. We don't want the park to go into liquidation. Mr. Dennis Kwok, 5 minutes. We have this paper. It's something from 2013, a meeting on the 24th of May. It's about the Pecuniary development project. Back then, the Commission for Tourism was saying this about the Pecuniary project. There would be a cap at $2.29 billion for the Pecuniary project, even if the project costs exceed the funding granted. The government will not offer additional financial support to the ocean park. That's what the government told us back in 2013. But here I see in the paper there's this capital expenditure to cover the costs for completing the Pecuniary project. So we are giving more money to the ocean park for the Pecuniary project. But back then you told us the sum should be $2.29 billion. What happened? Permanent Secretary? As another member said, in 2015, we came to the panel about the update estimate about the Pecuniary project. The government's commitment stayed the same. Anything that goes beyond the $2.29 billion will have to be shouldered by the ocean park. So when we came to the electoral earlier this year, the number is $3.8 billion. So anything that goes beyond the number will be shouldered by the ocean park. Then what about the capital expenditure? That's the remaining expenses. Some works are still ongoing. We're hoping that with this paper, then why are we footing the bill for the remaining expenses? I don't get this. So we want to avoid liquidation. Permanent Secretary, back then the loan was $2.29 billion, and now are you giving the ocean park more money? from the $2.29 billion all the way up to the 3.8 billion figure, the government is not giving the park more money. But what about the item B in paragraph 26? The capital expenditure covers the Pecuniary development project. That's the remaining costs. What do you mean by the remaining costs? Some construction works are still going on, close to completion. But you said there would be no further funding to the project. If we get the funding from this committee, then we can avoid liquidation for the ocean park. If we don't get the funding today, any creditor of the ocean park, including all those commercial, I'm not asking you about this. I'm asking you about the Pecuniary project. Is there a cost overrun, so you have to give them more money? The cost overrun is something we talked about. So the $2.29 billion cap is no longer valid, so you have to give them more. You have to give the park more money. That's for the remaining costs. And as for, I need to clarify this, the remaining cost. Say I have $500 I spend $400 I'm asking you, and then ask you for another $100. That's the remaining cost. But I want to ask you, are you asking for extra money for the costs? That doesn't seem consistent with the average person's understanding. We don't know how much it will cost for the remaining works. But we don't want to get into a situation where the contractors undertaking the works apply for liquidation of the park because they don't get remaining costs. That means you are going beyond, you're exceeding that 2.29 billion cap. We're here today for funding from the Finance Committee. Of course, I know that. Does it mean the remaining cost, is that cost beyond the cap of the $2.29 billion? We want to avoid liquidation. Are the remaining costs above and beyond the 2.29 billion figure we talked about back then? So now you're asking for extra funding. Is that correct? To avoid liquidation. I know you're doing this to avoid liquidation. Are you asking for money in addition to the 2.29 billion cap? The government commitment will not go beyond the cap. We're not asking the Finance Committee for government loan to complete the Pecuniary project. With this funding proposal, we want to avoid the liquidation of the ocean park. Mr. Michael Tin, 4 minutes. Thank you, Chair. Chair, I come from a business background. I've been in business for 30 plus years. I have taken out loans from banks. I borrowed money. From my experience, when a bank recalls its loans, the bank will look at your assets and see how much they're worth. If they see with very little asset and there's not much to be gained from you, they will turn to restructuring. And then you have a discussion for extending the repayment schedule and stuff. Based on what the ocean park has today, I don't think its assets can repay. It's not even enough for 10% of the loan. So from your response to me just then, Secretary, so the park will go into liquidation if there's nothing to save it. Chair, in my response earlier on, we apply for this package. Part of money will be used to repay the commercial loans. But the more pressing issue with the park is the cash flow problem. I agree with giving $2.2 billion to the park to sustain the park for a year. But my point was, we spend the $2.2 on the ongoing operation of the park. That part I agree with. I think other members have raised this point, but the impression you're giving me is that this proposal doesn't just work because you're saying that the banks is losing its patience. If we have $2.2 billion to keep the park in business for a year, and the banks, is it the case that the banks are just insisting on getting back their loans? Chair. The proposals raised by Mr. Tin just then have been discussed with the banks and the creditors. We talked about restructuring and stuff. But we haven't been able to work out anything ideal. You said the results are less than ideal. I know you're in business, Mr. Lau. If there is no result coming out of discussion, but what can the banks hopefully can expect to gain? The animals of the ocean park aren't worth a lot. Then why can't you go to the banks and talk about restructuring? If we give $2.2 billion to the ocean park to keep their operation for another year, it's actually a good idea for the bank. And you're the vice chairman of the board of Ocean Park. I don't want to use the word dereliction of duty, but does that mean you haven't tried, you haven't done what you could? You should have fought for it.
呢個就唔關政府。
And this is not about the government, not about the secretary, but somehow they're involved now. So please answer me. Chairman, whether or not a bank provides a loan or agrees to restructuring depends very much on, or depends on the assets you have, whether they can be realized. Depends on your repayment affordability and the financial position in the future. And the tourism industry has been hard hit by the epidemic, and I would say that the repayment ability naturally will be affected. We've spent 12 hours on this item, and I think it's getting repetitive. When we ask about the positioning of OP, we've asked a lot of times, and 28 times on the $5.4 billion operation, over 20 times, and closure of OP again over 20 times. I see that this item is of an urgent nature, and there are also subsequent items. There's an item relating to CSSA rates is also an urgent matter. So I need to draw a line, and then I will deal with the motions moved under 37A. So if you want to speak, press the button now. The Secretariat will note it down. We've spent too much time. I need to draw a line now. So if we don't have other members drawing the line, let me pressing the button. Well, at 10 a.m. I already urged members to come down. And again, reminded members just now. I've done my best. Mr. Jeremy Tam. Well, you didn't draw a line. I think you should give a 5-minute deadline, say by 11:10 or 11:15. If you don't come down, I'll draw a line. Well, I've made my decision and I've announced it. I have appealed to members many times. I can't do what you say. So if you don't press a button now, I'm going to draw a line. So members have all pressed the button. Maybe I'll give more flexibility and allow members to speak for 2 minutes each. We'll take a 10-minute break now.